So welcome everyone. Welcome Leslie, welcome to all of the attendees, wherever you might join from all over the world. Quick notice in advance, the session will be recorded. We will send out, as usual, the link to everyone who registered or everyone who joined later today or tomorrow. So if you have to leave early, just pay attention to the recording. You will be able to watch the recording afterwards. Today, our guest is Leslie Forbes from Axonius. Please, Leslie, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Lars. Yeah, no problem. I'm Leslie Forbes, an senior escalation engineer with Axonius, and my background is engineering as a whole, really, with electronics as a kind of a major, would you call it? That was in the early days. I did a bit of consultancy with year 2000 stuff for the people who were there around that time. Then went into system administration, antivirus for a couple of years, and a long stint then with vulnerability management, a short period with offensive security, the testing of defenses and so on, and the last almost 2 years with Axonius as in various roles with security as a backdrop.
That was it? That was it. Okay, perfect.
Short and sweet.
Perfect. So if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A section. I will keep an eye on that one, and if there is a question from the attendees, I will hand it over to Leslie. One additional information, we have already scheduled a technical session following this one. It will be on the 13th of March, going into the technical details of the platform. So if you're interested, just use the QR code here. You can scan it and register yourself. And I would be happy if some of the folks joining today, we can always meet in March for the technical session. So Leslie, let's start with a very general question to warm up. The session I described the session that it's hard to gain 100% visibility or near 100% visibility, for it's critical for the security team. So why is that? What is important about this 100% or nearly 100% visibility?
So there's two parts of this question. The one part is, why do we need 100%? And the other part is, how do you get 100%? Or why is it difficult to get 100%? And I think let's have a look at why do we need 100%. That question is kind of part of the old adage, you can't protect what you don't know. Or as are often referred to as the unknown unknowns, which are typically machines that are forgotten about. The ones, they're the ones that are most likely to require the most attention, because they're not kept up to date. They're kind of hidden away in closets, for example. But it could also extend into alternative networks, networks which exist under people's desks, for example, inside of VMware, for example, or VPCs that have been stood up, and so on. So it's not difficult to understand that there are these hidden away things which break away the context of 100%. And then why is it so difficult to get 100%? And that is also kind of difficult to explain. But when you have a system managing something or other, let's just say Active Directory, not all of the systems can enroll in Active Directory. Or if you're looking at Amazon, for example, Amazon doesn't include your Google Cloud Platform or your Azure stuff. So you need to have all of these portals or management interfaces all speaking the same language, and they don't. They can't all agree. So, whilst you might have 100% visibility of your Amazon infrastructure, you don't have visibility into Azure that view. You know, as soon as you start looking at it like that, it becomes obvious that 100% is never possible when you're looking at the big picture.
And it's also important to have everything with a single point of glass. I mean, if you want to analyze interdependencies between environment A and environment B, it's very hard to look at different data pods and grab everything together.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to make, right? Is, you know, whilst it's possible to look at your, you know, Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, that you know, is perceived as this encompasses everything as far as Azure is concerned. But right next door to that is Google or AWS or some other platform, which itself knows about its 100%. You know, so it's a really, really difficult. And I mean, even something like agent systems, you know, Tanium or CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or any one of these modern agent-based solutions, they know they're 100%. They'll never be able to tell you where they aren't.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've spoken about some on-premise and client server world challenges. The future, or we're already in the future. The future is SaaS. So what are the challenges in SaaS applications in terms of 100%? Why is it necessary, and how can we get to the 100% in a new SaaS environment?
SaaS is a very, very intertwined discussion, and there are multiple reasons for that. And you know, the simplest one is not all of them are regarded as first party. You know, so you might have your Okta or, you know, G Suite or, you know, whatever, you know, chosen platform it is as your sort of main entry point. But then very quickly we devolve into third and fourth party relevance or integrations with those platforms. And you know, we all know, whilst using mobile devices, that allowing access to our, you know, Google account or Apple account or whatever, you know, Facebook account that we have, allows access to that account to a third party or a fourth party. Maybe a chat platform, for example, or, you know, discuss in these kind of online forums. You don't need to sign in to discuss as a platform. It enables you to sign in by virtue of your having an account on a different platform. So the same applies in the corporate space. You know, it's really, really difficult to simply say, oh, we only use, you know, 10 or 15 or whatever the number is, chosen SaaS platforms, because it devolves very, very quickly. Is Zoom, you know, we're recording on Zoom today, and that typically isn't regarded as a fundamentally first platform system, and yet it is. And the question then becomes, all right, so we're signing into these, but where is our data? So that becomes a whole different, you know, pocket of discussion that is necessary.
Yeah, and in the old world, a user could purchase like a laptop or a desktop and store it under his desk, but it's even much easier in the new SaaS world to just purchase whatever with your private credit card and use it for company purposes, and you have no idea about it.
And that has happened. It happens frequently.
Yeah.
Even worse than that, Lars, is the fact that the corporate credit card is often used to stand up infrastructure which doesn't fall under IT's purview or their visibility or whatever it is. And you know, I've often heard the discussion sort of, you know, kind of amusingly referred to as, let's use the credit card to reconcile all of these Amazon accounts, because, you know, here we have, you know, 20 Amazon accounts, but we're recording VPCs which don't show up on any one of these.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not difficult to see how the sprawl works.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the challenges. So what is Axonius' approach to tackle these challenges?
Well, so let's start right at the top, right? Axonius's mission is to be the system of record for all of digital infrastructure. The way that we do that is by providing what we call adapters. Let's call them connectors in a common parlance. The object of the collector is to simply go to let's just call it a system of record in its own right, so VMware, Active Directory, Zoom, Okta, any one of those kind of systems, and request data to be imported into the Axonius platform. And once all of the data is collected from these, we've got 800 odd adapters that are now part of this warehouse. Now you can bring in all this data, but what do you do with it? We have to normalize these things, so who is a user? What is a user? Is it a user? Is it a username? Is it a user ID? All of those represent different representations for a user. An IP address, IPv4, IPv6. Those are all different representations, but all refer to, the addressability of a device. So, we need to normalize all of that data. We aggregate all of these things together, correlate them so that there's a common identity, if you want to call it that, between all of the things that are brought in and elements of data that each of these systems knows about a single asset. So my computer name is registered inside of CrowdStrike, but it's also registered inside of Active Directory. We want to correlate those together. Once all of this data is there, that makes it queryable on any one of those fields. So it might be, what disks are attached to a computer inside of VMware. It might be the disks attached to my actual laptop that you mentioned earlier. It could be just a user. What SaaS applications does this user have access to? Because we've been bringing in that data from, let's just say, Okta, as the identity platform. So the point really is that it doesn't matter where the data originates. Once it's aggregated and correlated inside of Axonius, then you can bring to bear any query that you can imagine to look into the data and try and understand how it is segmented, or how it relates to manageability, for example. And then, of course, once you've brought that that level of data, I often refer to it as a big data system. I mean, it's not technically a big data system, but the volume of data that we're importing, I see this kind of thing day in and day out. But we bring in like gigabytes of data just from Azure AD, gigabytes of data from the Tenables and the Qualises, because of all of the vulnerability information that pertains to systems. So it is big data, but in that sense, it is all neatly stored and indexed. So what this means is that now, after we've been able to ask a query, let's say which machines that we know about that we fetch data on, don't have the relevant agent on it for our internal what do they call them nowadays? Endpoint detection and response, EDR. So which of these systems don't have the agent on? Okay, well, that's not difficult to find that, because, well, we know what we fetch from SentinelOne or various sources. What do we do about that? Well, the fact that we have these systems enrolled in some kind of remote management system, whether it's system, what's it called? MSDE, that's the new one now, isn't it? Whatever the terminology is. But the point is that once you've got the ability to deploy software, we could say, all right, well, these machines that we've identified which don't have the relevant agent on, we're going to push it out using our deployment software or deployment solution, and that is all automated through the interface of Axonius. So Axonius is not just a fetcher, it's a pusher as well. So implementing what we call the enforcement center, implementing an enforcement center action is part of the automation. And we all kind of know that, automation is the friend of security. If you can repeatedly do something, you can be certain that it's going to be done. It's quite trivial for a person if they're, tasked with doing something, they go on holiday, they forget, they don't come in the morning, they get sick.
Yeah.
So, when computers can do stuff for us, it makes so much more sense to, what let's call a build a recipe and implement that recipe to do something very specific, like install and start up a management agent or a security agent or whatever it is. It could extend into something more mundane just by tagging, So if you wanted to, let's say, if you wanted to use a SIM system inside of your enterprise, for a SOC purpose, you might want to tag systems as being, more or less important. For example, so you might want to say, all right, let's tag all of our databases with a certain thing, but this database, has got a far higher priority, so let's tag it with a stronger tag. Or this system is less likely to be targeted because it's behind 3 layers of firewall. It's just a lab system, and really, frankly, we don't care about it. But the CEO's laptop, we need to have eyes on that thing 24/7, because, well, it could easily be used to mount an attack on money transfers or whatever those kind of flavor of the day is. So being able to tag things and then using that by a third party, because of course we provide an API. Everything's API based nowadays. So we provide an API into Axonius so that a third party system could access it and say, hey, tell me all you know about this device, or tell me all you know about this network, or tell me all you know about this user. And bringing in tags already helps in automating decisions in the SOC for whether to implement an alert, for example. So there's so many different use cases, but it all starts with just being able to fetch the data into the system.
And being able to query on a manual basis and being able to automate for the stuff that is repeatable. That's
exactly.
yeah.
Sorry, I forgot to mention. Yeah, you kind of separated those two things. The automate. I mean, the manual way of querying things enables us to save those queries and then to build those into dashboards, build them into enforcement center actions, build them into secondary actions, maybe like tagging or updating systems. There's so many different ways of enriching the data too on a system. So, I mean, you could ask if you learned about a network, say, for example, that's got external accessibility, well, let's go and ask Shodan. Shodan is a treasure trove of data about external entities. And we're all kind of heavily focused on internal here. I mean, we've talked about SaaS applications, but mentally, those things are still internal, right? But so let's suppose that we learn about a internet accessible network. Let's ask Shodan about that. It's an enrichment action that is available inside of the enforcement center. Well, as soon as you learn about this network, go and ask Shodan, and Shodan will stamp its own data onto that asset.
Okay, we've spoken about the SOC use case. You mentioned that we've been working on the vulnerability side of things for quite some time. What is, if you're responsible for vulnerability management, what can Axonius help you with?
So the experience that I have with vulnerability management is somewhat useful, because it helps one to understand the scope of possibilities, or the range of possibilities. That's the better word. The range of possibilities that can be brought with Axonius as a central part of any vulnerability management program, or what's the modern term, RB, risk-based vulnerability management.
All these new terms.
We better use all of these acronyms, right? But so the thing is, vulnerability scanners, they're very adept at finding devices on networks and assessing them for vulnerabilities Yeah, especially if it's network based. I mean, agent based systems, find really, really good detail about, their target systems. But, in terms of discoverability, network scanners are awesome. But it's limited to where that system is deployed. If you've got a scanner at the sort of core of your network, inevitably you'll be able to, fan it out and find, all the networks which are attached to the main, let's just call it central core. But what about when the users go home? We don't know anything about those networks at home. Or what about the DMZ? Or what about, we spoke about, cloud service providers, so the AWSs and the Azures and Googles and so on. What do we know about those systems? Chances are that the licensing for the vulnerability scanner or the vulnerability management system doesn't extend into those platforms, and we need to rely on a different source. So I mean, AWS does provide some insight with its whatever their sheriff system is called. I forget now off the cuff. But let's suppose that we've got a different system inside of AWS and a third system inside of Azure, for example. How do we correlate all of the data, or how do we aggregate all of the data into one local place that we can create a simple picture, and that the CISO can get a good view of where's the risk? If one system is printing the data in one format and the different systems printing data in a different format, how can you compare those two? Where's the baseline?
Yep.
So the point really is that when you bring all of this stuff, now we've got adapters for all of the vulnerability, all of the well-known vulnerability sources, the Tenable, Qualys, Rapid7, all of those different, and I mean, CrowdStrike also brings vulnerability data. SentinelOne has got some level of vulnerability information, and so on. When we bring all of that together, we can run a single query over all of the devices and tell me about all of the vulnerabilities that were found in 2022. Or tell me where Log4j is. And we don't care what the origin of that information is, whether it comes from a Tenable or a Qualys, makes no difference. But then being able to present a single picture, and like you said, a single pane of glass, makes the queryability and the manageability right across the board so much simpler. And it might even extend into what's missing. So the biggest challenge for anybody who manages vulnerability management systems is how do we ensure that we've got coverage of all of these possible targets? And it's common that we find systems inside of Axonius which have never seen a scanner, or which the scanner has never seen. It depends which way you look at it from, I guess. But the essence of it is that we need to be able to point those systems out and say, well, why has this never been scanned? Oh, it's because it's on some private subnet, deep inside of a VMware system underneath somebody's desk, like you said. But it could be anywhere. It could be for any reason. It might have been somebody's machine that they brought in, BYOD, bring your own disaster. But anyway, it needs to be scanned. And maybe the scanning only happens once a week, but this system arrived yesterday and was never scanned in the previous scan job. Okay, well, that's okay. That's easily solved. Run and wait for the next scan next week. But that person's gone home already. So this is the challenge that anybody who's managing vulnerability management inside of a corporation has to consider. So there's a kind of a third part to this discussion, which is those systems which don't, can I say, participate in the scanning activities. How do we know about them? It might be that we'll never get scanning visibility into those systems for whatever reason. It might be just that it's a third-party organization that you were doing M&A with, whatever. The capability exists inside of Axonius now to enrich devices with what we call NVD, what's known as NVD, National Vulnerability Database. And, that's kind of like, let's just call it the central repository of vulnerabilities across the internet. And it's fairly well regarded. But in the absence of any other vulnerability data, all we need is a list of software that's installed on a machine in order to enrich that machine with known vulnerabilities from the NVD. So, if we know that Chrome is installed on a certain machine that's never been scanned, we can typically know what the version of that Chrome is, and simply by referring to NVD, understand what vulnerabilities exist in that device. So we call that enrichment. And then there's secondary types of enrichment for all of these devices that we've talked about. So those that have brought by, vulnerability management solutions, as well as those that have now been enriched by virtue of just having software installed on them. We can enrich them with the MSRC. We enrich them with CISO KEV, known exploit vulnerabilities. Exploit prediction scoring system, which looks at the chances of a probability of exploitation. So EPSS. All of those are available enrichments on devices that already exist. So there's a huge scope for enabling vulnerability management programs to use a single source of data.
Yeah, that's massive. Yeah. So let's talk about other use cases Axonius can support customers with. So let's start with the CMDB. So if I have a CMDB, what are typical challenges and how can Axonius help?
So CMDB is the competition. Well, a lot of people view it that way. But so the problem I think with CMDB is that it is largely a very, let's just call it a static collection of stuff. A lot of people cast a jaded eye on CMDB when you mention CMDB, and that is because they can never trust or never rely on the data that comes out of the CMDB. You can trust the data that goes in, but when does it go in? Well, maybe when there's an acquisition of Dell computers, right? So, every one of the 100 Dell computers that we bought last month, they've been added. They've all got, what do we call these things? Tags or asset labels on them. But more than that, we don't know. We don't even know what networks they're connected to, who owns them or anything. Sometimes that gets updated, but I'm trying to point out that CMDBs are slow, right? So they're a necessary part of the business in order to manage systems and know, who spent money on what system. The benefit that we bring with Axonius is simply being able to reconcile CMDBs. So we import the data. We've got connectors for all of the major CMDBs. We bring all of that data in and say, well, what do we know about all of these systems? Where are there overlaps with known systems or active systems on the network? So we've brought in all the stuff from, what lives on a network from all the Cisco devices. So Cisco knows about everything because it's at the central core of the network. Which of these systems are in Active Directory? Which systems belong to all of the management platforms, so on. And then it's trivial to be able to say, all right, well, we know that this device was only brought in from ServiceNow. Why does it exist only in ServiceNow and has never been seen on the network anywhere? Well, maybe it doesn't exist at all. Maybe it's been decommissioned or whatever. So that helps us now to reconcile. We could now tag systems which are only imported from a CMDB, have got no other adapter relevance, tag it as being possibly decommissioned. Now, send that back into the CMDB, and the CMDB now knows that this thing is now possibly decommissioned. So we're doing the work of a human, but super fast, because it takes hours for people to pore over spreadsheets and say, all right, well, let's try and correspond, but I missed that item in that spreadsheet. That kind of thing happens. So this is the nice way of being able to use CMDBs effectively and efficiently, is to be able to to reconcile what we have in the CMDB with what we've learned from all of these other sources that we were talking about. We have got customers who have multiple CMDBs, either through, specifically chosen to go that way, or through M&A. They've purchased businesses or acquired other businesses, and they've all got different, sources of CMDB. But how about building a unified version of that only from what we know is in Axonius? The thing about Axonius is that it's constantly updated. It's live, if you want to put it that way. So, having a CMDB which is populated explicitly and only from Axonius is really cool.
Okay, so one other use case that comes into my mind. So if there is maybe a due diligence, you already spoke about M&As. So due diligence actions or huge IT projects. How can Axonius help there?
So that is also a really, really easily achievable goal with Axonius. And the reason I say that is because anytime you're building a project, or you've got a project, putting metrics on that project is really the only way to measure the success of that project. So how many systems here versus how many systems there? Or, when we're migrating from one system to another, how frequently is that one updated? When was the last update to this one? Or anything that you need to implement in the IT landscape is really crucial. So having a unified way to present that measurement is really important. Now, this is the cool thing about Axonius, is Axonius doesn't have a vested interest in any of them. So we're not ServiceNow, we're not SentinelOne, we're not CrowdStrike. So we don't have to prove which one is accurate. All that we're doing is saying, this is the truth that I got from one of those platforms. So, whether it's CMDB or whatever project or program that we're busy with, you can trust what you're getting from Axonius because of the validity of the source data. So good data in, good data out, basically. So being able to measure these things, whatever type of program it is, let's just say that you're trying to implement an MFA rollout. First of all, let people know that they need to enroll their YubiKey, whatever application is that we're going for. Let people enroll it, and we can measure the enrollment process up to whatever point. So we've determined that we're going to accelerate this by the stage that maybe 80% are enrolled. And then it's easy to measure how many people are actively using these devices, because we're logging into our identity provider who knows, who's using their object or their device. Pardon me. And all you need to do is put this on a chart and so show these two lines where they're intersecting. This is the usage in the old system versus the usage in the new system. And at that stage, you can then again implement automation, maybe email the users and say, hey, by the way, you've enrolled your device, but you've never used it. And having that level of segmentation provides the should we call it direct communication or a direct effect on the output. It's not a let's mail everybody. So if you've got 100,000 users, are you going to mail everybody even if 80% are enrolled? No, that's a waste of time. So that it brings a lot of capability when in consideration of measurement inside of big projects. I don't know if does that correctly answer your thought process? Is that what you were looking for?
Absolutely. I mean, it's measuring, yes, but also automation. The examples you brought. I mean, the complexity of the environments grows and grows, and to keep track, there is no way other than automating. And if you have the data and you have the capabilities to automate stuff based on the data, what do you need?
Yeah, I think that is the central part of any management effort is knowing what to measure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been the nightmare of many a team, is knowing that they've got a project, but what do you measure on that project in order to justify the investment firstly, and justify the continued investment secondly.
Okay, let's move over to the SaaS world again. So let's discuss a couple of use cases in the SaaS world. So we already spoke about yeah, the challenge that end users can purchase application, can use applications the central IT team doesn't know about. So what would be use cases for Axonius here?
So in the SaaS world, the implementation of a SaaS measurement or SaaS monitoring or SaaS tracking maybe is probably a better term, aspect of Axonius platform means that it's possible to measure the sprawl of SaaS applications. Now, this is kind of what we started off with by saying, how is it possible to, when you ask a CSO, how many SaaS applications you use, and inevitably they'll say, oh, maybe 10 or 20. We use Salesforce and we use this and we use that. But then, they kind of forget about the secondary applications that might be connected to an identity platform, for example, or that are authorized through some or other program like G Suite through a Google account. Or I'm trying to think of another really good example of one which is authorized but never really signed up for. And it could be something like Miro. Miro, it provides lots of kind of free charting applications, for example. Another one is Lucid. Those kind of things. Yes, you can sign up for them as primary sources of data, but inevitably there are newer providers of applications which encourage users just to try it out. And by simply using your corporate IT email address, you're already aligning as a fourth party that with some other source of authentication or authorization. So that's the difficulty with SaaS. So we've again built connectors into all of these major providers of SaaS applications, and it's our experience that organizations typically end up with more than 100 of these applications. While the CISO or the CSO or responsible person thought that they might have 15 or 20 of these applications. So a multiplier of 5 before you even blink is not unheard of. So the next part of that equation then becomes, all right, so are all the users authorized to use all the applications? In an organization with, say, 100,000 users, and you're paying £5 a user or £10 a user, or €5 or €10 or what, it doesn't matter where you're at, but do we actually need all of these what do we call them, subscriptions for every single user? And that becomes a segmentation challenge, which Axonius knows a ton about segmentation, and the net result is that it's possible to manage budget through the use of Axonius and how it recognizes all of these SaaS applications and their usage and assignment. Because you'll be able to tell by logging into, let's just say, Zoom as an example, how many subscriptions do we have and how many have used Zoom in the last 30 days or whatever your accounting window is. So it's not difficult to find that data and draw a conclusion from it.
Yeah, it's again having the data and being able to query and being maybe also being able to automate based on something you don't want to have or something you want to see.
I expect so. So, I mean, there are certainly, again, enforcement actions which can be implemented on the SaaS platforms too. Because this is an integrated system, it's not that we're running SaaS applications in a different window to the what we refer to as chasm in the previous discussion. This is all one integrated system, so it's easy to link all of these things together, trying to understand which users are using various applications, whether it just might have been a one-off, let's try this thing out, but have the ability to, within 15 days or whatever the window is for that provider, to disable that account so that it doesn't become chargeable to the business. So all of those kind of things, like you say, automation really, really helps to bring a level of management which a human would be challenged with.
Yeah. And one thing that I really was impressed with when I first saw it was really to also link data from the client server world to the SaaS world. So, for example, if you want to see which users use which devices to access a specific SaaS application, if there is whatever vulnerability in the SaaS application or incident in the SaaS application that might be linked to a local vulnerability on your end user device, it's really, really helpful to have every part of the data, every data source in one pane of glass.
Absolutely right. And I mean, it extends into vulnerability space or an incident, like you say. It could also be in a broader context of incident. Well, maybe a user's account was compromised. And that's a really, really serious issue for organizations which have got, let's just call it, IDPs, which enable access to various applications simply by virtue of the device or the account. So having the ability to say, all right, well, we understand that this person's account on XYZ SaaS platform was compromised. What other platforms does this user have access to? And by virtue of those accesses, what fourth party applications also have access to that data? So this becomes not just an account issue, it becomes a data issue. Where are all of my data? Where are these things? Where are fragments of data that need to be managed when there's a lot of fallout?
Yep.
So it's really critical to have all of that data to hand, like you say, in one single place, when you need to respond to an incident.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also heard that there are, you're checking configurations in some of the SaaS platforms. Maybe you can point that out as well.
Yeah, I don't have a huge insight into that CNAP stuff, right? I don't have a huge insight into the elements of configuration, and it is certainly a very, very crucial part of any cloud management or cloud management program is to know what the configurations are and know when there are glaring or gaping holes in that let's just call it deployment of whatever application it is. And there are tons and tons of applications which have got hundreds themselves, hundreds of configuration elements. I mean, Google's a really good example. Amazon is a really good example. Salesforce is just as good an example. They've all got a plethora of options to configure. So Axonius does absolutely. It's one of the early things that they implemented in the SaaS management platform was knowing what configurations each of those platforms bring and how does it measure up with the various standards that are available.
Okay. So, Leslie, thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to all of the attendees for joining us. If you have any questions about Axonius, if you have any other questions, please reach out to Andy or to myself. As I already mentioned, we'll send out the link to the recording probably later today or tomorrow. So you're able to share it maybe with peers of yours. And yeah, please don't forget to register for the technical session we scheduled for March. Again, where is my finger? Here's the QR code to register. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And thank you for everyone. Bye bye.